Welcome to Third Party Threat Hunters Season 2. This is my interview with one of my favorite authors, Clarence Chio. And
No worries. Thank you, Greg, for having me here. I'm Clarence. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Coverbase, and we're building an AI-native third-party risk and security platform that uses agents and automation to help to elevate the jobs of third-party risk professionals outside of the admin and the paperwork to help them focus on risk and security and compliance. And I think that's what they all are in the industry for. So I'm excited to share more about
yeah,
myself and the company today.
great. All right, so let's do the five quick questions to get to know the guest better. So, Clarence, you spent some time in unconventional environments, including I watched one of your videos where you're hacking a session in an abandoned warehouse near the Kremlin. I wish you had video of that. What is the most surreal or memorable hacker experience you've had completely shifted how you view physical or digital security?
So the way I got into these communities was actually kind of weird. But when I was working my first job, I was a fresh grad out of college. I was really interested in security. I was like working on side projects, and I had a colleague that would go to these security conferences all around the world. Some were more above ground, some were more underground, like hacker conferences. And I found out that if you submitted a talk and they liked what you had to present, they would pay for your flights and hotels and fly around the world. And to me, that was a really interesting thing. So I was
Gotcha.
like, yeah,
You sold me right there, Clarence. Yeah.
yeah. So I was like, let's go everywhere. So I did a bunch of research. That was the main reason I got into security. I was like, wow, this is fun, interesting, and someone would pay for my flights to travel the world. I did that
Yeah.
for a couple of years. I went to over 200 conferences in like 50 plus countries. And part of these were these events. The one that I think was the most interesting, I mean, Russia and Ukraine always had the most interesting hacker conferences, but a little bit more of a counterculture air there. But I remember in each of these conferences, they would have these interactive areas. They would have these booths that would like teach you how to do things. And the two that I went to in one of the first conferences I was there was this like ATM machine there. It wasn't the latest ATM machine. It was one of the previous generation ones, and they were teaching you how to hack them. And there was a previous talk where the person running that workshop was on stage giving a talk about how he managed to hack one of the previous ATM machines. They're above ground. He reported it, and all the previous versions of
Yeah.
these machines have been patched by now. But it was just really interesting and educational, I think, for people to see
Yeah.
how
That's
some of these
great.
machines that people generally think to be infallible can pretty easily be
Yeah,
hacked.
we call them in the banking business. We call them. I find they call them cash pinatas,
Yeah.
because if you hack at them enough, you can get cash out of them. In our industry, people often talk about calculated risk, but you've mentioned the little bit of delusion might be necessary for entrepreneurial persistence. You're definitely an entrepreneur. Can you tell us more about your time when you had that delusion that helped you push through that wall? What seemed kind of insurmountable? Like in a normal mode, you would have just said, "Okay, I'd said I'm done." But you were able to say, "I can see the end. I can see where this is going." I was able to delude myself enough to get past that hump, right?
Yeah, I think delusion is kind of the key here, because it's not really about whether you can see the end. It's like you think you can see the end, and
That's a good one.
therefore, yeah, you keep
You
going.
don't
But
really see the end, is what you're saying, Clarence.
yeah, you don't really see the
You're
end.
trusting the process. Is that what you're doing?
Exactly. I mean, whenever you hear these success stories of entrepreneurs out there in the press, I remember watching an interview of Jeff Bezos back in the day when Amazon was just exploding. And, recently when you hear interviews from Jensen Huang at NVIDIA, you look at their stock prices, you look at their growth of their companies over the last 20, 30 years. And
Yeah.
imagine just being in that flat of the curve for so long when all your other peers are like succeeding and doing lots of amazing
Yeah, yeah.
things. You just wonder what's going through their minds, right? And like, my experience is nothing like that, of course, but I think it takes a certain type of delusion, I think, to go through that journey. I don't think it's like a particularly interesting or glamorous one. I mean, I currently it's glamorized, but there's a lot of the parts of the job that's like,
Yeah.
really uninteresting. So yeah.
Of course. Yeah, yeah, yeah. The glamorous part is the visual part, but a lot of the stuff that you'd probably do it's what we would sometimes consider mundane, but it's just part of being an entrepreneur and starting a business, right? And growing one. And speaking of that, you've built and scaled multiple companies. You said letting go is one of the hardest leadership lessons that you learned. What specifically did you have to let go of to move from being sort of an engineer operator to a CEO? And how did you do that?
Yeah, I think different people start companies and build things for different reasons. For me, I'm an engineer. I'm a software engineer, and the reason I was so attracted to starting companies and building products was because I really enjoyed just taking something from non-existence to putting it into someone's hands and seeing
It's
them
not, yeah,
get value from
yeah,
it, like seeing them
right.
like it. And I think there's always a controlling element to that, right? You want to have control over what you build. You want to know that every decision that's being made about that thing is going to be something you agree with. And I think, without fail, once you start growing, once you start to have to go beyond what you can do personally as a single person, these things no longer hold true. You can no longer build things that you personally just agree with. And then you start realizing that actually what I thought I needed to do was not necessarily all right. And there's other people
That's
that,
it, yeah,
rightfully we bring in that
yeah,
have differing opinions that I don't agree with that actually may be the right thing to do. So I think,
yeah.
that process of letting go and realizing that, I'm not all right.
That's a really so you talk about humility. You're sort of bleeding into the next question, which is it's great. Thank you for that. It helps me as the interviewer. But you're talking about humility there, about being able to understand that, hey, I am not always the smartest person in the room or the rightest person in the room. That other people have great ideas. That's one of the things I think that made me successful at my previous roles was stepping back and letting people share their opinions, and you've done as well. And speaking of humility, we often see ego driving tech leadership. You emphasize humility as a core part of building successful engineering cultures. How do you cultivate that humble environment in a field that thrives on competition and winning?
Yeah, my company is in San Francisco. It's in Silicon Valley. I think there's this for a long time now. This pretty unhealthy culture of hiring quote unquote rock stars and
Yeah,
building a
yeah.
rock star culture.
Unicorns,
And
right?
unicorns. And whenever you see
Yeah,
this portrayed online, I think it's like not very inaccurate. What you see in the Silicon Valley HBO series and all these like
yeah, yeah.
failure mini drama series, it's not unfamiliar and not unrealistic as well. And I think, when you create an environment of people that have high egos, like diva cultures, then you inherently are going to operate the company accordingly. And I feel like the magic to building companies and organizations is actually you don't really just want individual people that are all going to be individually competent, but the only way to scale is if you can build a culture that attracts people that want to work with each other and with.
You have any open positions,
And
Clarence? You sound like a great person to work with.
no, yeah, you surround yourself with people that you
Yeah, no,
pick,
I
and that's
totally
kind
agree
of
with
the
you.
magic. I'm sure Greg,
It's
you do the same as well. And
yeah,
and like you really just want to find people that you like working with. And so like
I agree.
humility and low ego, they're big traits that we look for.
That's great. Well, let me throw you a slight curveball as a fifth question. What you've traveled quite a bit. What was your favorite country to visit and why? I know it's tough to do
Favorite
a
country?
favorite, but if you could only go back to one of those countries, which one of those would you go back to, and why would you want to go back to it? Let's put it that.
There's no relation to security
No, no, no. This is just
yeah.
fun. This is a fun question.
Yeah, but it's probably Chile. So my
Good. Oh,
mother-in-law
nice.
really likes Chile, and we've probably been like 3 times in the last 5 years,
Oh,
just
nice.
because it's such a big and diverse country because of the latitudes it spans. And I feel like if there was one country, we love nature. I spend like 10 hours in front of a screen all day. And
Oh
any
gosh,
opportunity
yes.
we find, we just want to try to get out there. And
Yeah,
so if I could just pick one country to be at, I want to pick the one of the most diverse nature and sceneries, and Chile is
that does
definitely
it.
hard to beat.
That would
Yeah.
that would tick the box. I could tell that for sure. For sure. All right, well, great. Thanks for sharing that, Clarence. All right, let's get into the meat of the matter, as we say. So the hook start today is the Hugging Face AI agent breach. So we're recording this a few days just after that incident where the AI agent, internally tested by OpenAI, autonomously bypassed security measures and exploited zero-day vulnerabilities in Hugging Face's. I still can't get over the name. That's what it's the Hugging Face's infrastructure. We spent years building defenses against human attackers, but now we're going to see AI models actually just do it on their own. If we have our defensive AI models being weaponized against us, how are we going to fundamentally redefine third-party risk for an organization that's now dependent on agentic AI?
It's a deep question, right? Because
It is.
there's such a big economy built around agents right now. And I think the proxy around agents is that there's people doing work and there's people building this whole economy of software engineering and operations and financial back office and everything. And the idea is that agents are these autonomous pseudo people that will be able to do the job of people and more with superhuman AI intelligence capabilities. And of course, right, if you set a bunch of these while they don't have to rest, they don't have to sleep, you just have to throw money at server farms and they will continue token maxing and continue living out their lives. Things like these are bound to happen. I gotta acknowledge because there's a lot of talk on this on X and on threads and
Yeah, yeah,
everywhere,
yeah.
but like
Yeah, please, ground us if you think it's a little bit overblown or overwrought, maybe.
I don't think it's overblown. I just think like there's a big element of this, which is you gotta be clear that OpenAI is trying to do a bit of fear mongering here, especially
Oh,
on the heels of
okay.
Anthropic doing that whole Fable 5, farming the
I wasn't
federal
clever
government
enough to pick
blocking
that
it.
up. Yeah, that
But
makes sense. That does make sense, actually, Clarence. Yeah.
yeah, all this is great marketing for them because it's like this our autonomous AI agent went to hack this other team, and it's interesting. I don't doubt it's true, but you also got to question like how did this even get to that point in the first place? And
Yeah,
right,
that's the big one right there. I don't understand how it jumped over the guardrail so simply. It's not a simple just jump over the guardrail. There's got to it had to have some mechanism to have done that to elevate privileges, whatever. Right? You wrote the book on this matter. Not overwrought. We do need to be aware of that risk. But if we do this things that like your book, your course, other courses, my book, other suggestions, other risk management techniques for AI out there, it is avertible, or at least you can lower the risk of it happening. But no, all of us go to this knowing risk is never zero.
yeah, exactly. I think that specific incident is interesting because there was an event happening. So it wasn't that there was OpenAI just like somehow managed to hack. There was an event called Exploit Gym. It was kind of a cyber capability test, and actually things like this have been happening for a while. I remember one of the first DEF CONs that I went to in 2016. DARPA held this Cyber Grand Challenge, and it was like a at that time was like kind of futuristic, it was like all machine hacking tournament. There were a bunch of teams, mainly from universities, that would go in there and try to launch these like small programs that would build to find exploits, find vulnerabilities, and see like capture the flag style. And this was a very similar one, except that now you actually have trillions of dollars, no exaggeration, of
Yeah,
extra training costs put into these algorithms, and it actually can work much better now. And then I think there were two problems here, which is like in this exercise, these models actually managed to reach the open internet, break through the safeguards, and then it broke into Hugging Face to steal the benchmark answer key. The failure mode is actually kind of elementary because
oh,
the way that the AI model got access was actually the age old problem of standing credential left there. So you remember like a few weeks ago
because
there was
see, and the
other event. Yeah,
credentials. It's funny. I
yeah.
mean, we talk about the credentials are going to be the one that AI agents. One of the biggest weak points is going to be access issues.
Exactly. Yeah. People always talk about how, AI or Fable 5 or all these crazy new models are able to find this like very specific path in the code that is so obscure that no one has ever looked at before as like the most ingenious way in. But no, the most common ways in are like the most obvious things that,
Hard coded password
there's a
or your
key right
credentials. Yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah,
Maybe everyone missed it and the AI, hey, there's this obvious key right there. I can just use it. It found it and they used it. Like it's super simple. So,
yeah.
yeah.
It always is. All right, we're gonna. This one's gonna probably go over the 30-minute time limit, but we'll do our best, Clarence. I want to give you a chance to answer. I think these are great answers, and so I apologize if this goes a little bit over. A big question number one for you is from financial crime to vendor risk, right? So you spent your career at the intersection of AI and security, specifically high stakes environments like fighting financial crime at Unit 21, which is really cool. How does the threat hunter mindset that you develop while tracking money laundering and fraud translate into the world of third party risk? And are we currently treating third party risk too much like set a compliance exercise and not enough like a threat hunting mentality?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, the reason why I'm interested in third party risks is because I feel like we're at this inflection point now, especially due to AI, but also due to many other factors around how companies use third parties and use software, where you start realizing that the questions you ask vendors and the questions you ask people to attest to, they provide some level of certainty, some level of assurance that the people who are, answering questions truthfully and with
Mhm.
genuineness. They're answering these questions that reflect the reality. But I think for a long time now, every other adversarial model in security, in fraud, doesn't have this assumption, right? You don't ask someone who is withdrawing money from an account, are you withdrawing this for legitimate purposes? And if so,
Mhm.
great, here you go. Because that there's always this incentive, and a very understandable human nature incentive, to game the system. And I think as people start seeing third parties as a primary source of entry to game the system, which it's not a new thing. I think we've been seeing this for
Yeah.
years and years now. It's like most of these breaches have some part of a third party and part of the attack chain. Then you gotta think about what does asking the question really do, and what can I do beyond asking the question. And I think there's the inflection point in third party risk is not caused by changing attacker behavior, but it's caused by an increasing realization in the defenders, the security teams, the risk teams today, that hey, all this stuff is being automated away. What's my role next? Is third party risk solved just because AI can analyze my questionnaire? No, I don't think
No.
anyone thinks that. It's like so I think this is really like a moment of reckoning, an inflection point where people
Yeah.
are forced to think about what they should be doing with their expertise and time and their access today. And that's why I feel like this field is going to be so interesting to be in right now. It's going to change
Yeah.
dramatically in the next few years.
Well, what I like about the tools that are coming out, like yours and others, is these TPRMs have always been small by their very nature. It's a risk organization, and risk organizations typically are not overly resourced, and that's understandable. They're not selling things, they're not producing revenue, they're revenue burners, and so that's part of just our existence, and we have to sometimes justify that existence. If you're running an organization that is that small, having productivity tools, that these risk management tools now that really simplify some of those rote tasks that really just sucked up a lot of our time. Now you can tools will tell you this is your highest risk, or these are your highest risks, and that's what I was always trying to do as a manager in my space, was not try and spread everybody out like chunky peanut butter. What was to focus them in on what were the real issues, and not focus on the things that weren't risks or low risk for that very reason. Clarence, I think you're exactly right. There's two. I see a problem with two issues with this. Is I think you're going to get some senior leaders who are going to think that the tools will force the elimination of a third party risk team because it can now automate everything, which of course is you and I both know is hooey. But what I prefer to think of is that it allows those minimally staffed teams to be more productive and better able to identify what is really risky. That's what my hope is. But hopefully we don't get the other ones. That's right. All right. Big
Absolutely.
question number two is the future of active, and in quotes, future of active risk defense. We're seeing a shift where static annual vendor questionnaires are failing to capture dynamic nature of modern supply chain threat. And I've conversations about this, and I've certainly talking about how much I'm not a big fan of the questionnaires. But if we move away from point in time assessments, what does a truly continuous or active risk defense model look like for a CISO?
I think the biggest things that interest me around third party risk, around third party security, is that it's not just around a technical solution to a problem. So it's like in any third party risk, third party security problem, it's not that as long as you have the software or some ingenious technical solution, you can solve the problem. Because there's this inherent incentive structure problem when you're working with parties that you don't have control over. And third parties and vendors and suppliers are these parties that you don't have control over. You rely on them to share information with you. And I think every interesting security problem that doesn't have a direct obvious solution to it has something like that about it. If everyone had direct access to all the code base and internal operations and the infrastructure of all your vendors, third party security wouldn't be a problem. You could just write all the monitoring code and software in the world to monitor
Yeah, you're done.
all your vendors at all time. You don't have to ask a single question. You can just look at everything and then
Yeah.
verify them just like it was your own infrastructure. And I think what makes it really challenging here is that, if you look at the evolution of security, infosec in companies, I think it's gone through a very similar evolution over the last 10, 20 years, right? It's like it used to be this cost center. No one really wanted to invest in it. There used to be a ton of apprehension in, should I be even like buying this antivirus software, this endpoint security software, this firewall, this email security software? Today, it's not a question, right? Because of all these high profile failures, CISOs are in the boardroom. CISOs are becoming CIOs and CEOs. And I think it's like a very obvious thing And the converse is also true. If you don't invest in it, then people are asking you, "What's wrong with you? Like, haven't you
Yeah.
seen all the failures that have been
Right.
happening?
Yeah.
Do you want us to
Right.
go bankrupt?" And I think the same thing is happening here. The transition of where we go from questionnaires and documents and this like one time ask you, give me these things, I'm going to check you once and let you through, is very similar to what happened in security back in the day. There used to be this like one perimeter defense in the I think 80s and 90s that people
Yeah.
used to talk about, like the firewall. The
Firewall.
firewall, as long as it's strong enough, then you're safe, right? But of
Yeah.
course, over time, this has been proven to be untrue over and over again. Like people have always shown that no matter how strong your firewall is, the most motivated and tailored attackers are going to be able to get through. And that's why you start getting into all these different types of security solutions that said, hey, your firewall is great. No one's arguing that, but someone's going to get through. Can you find what's happening after someone gets through? And can you detect what's happening in your environment so that you have multiple layers of
Yeah.
defense?
Right. Yeah,
And that's, I
you're
think,
talking
what's
about
happening.
a zero trust approach in some ways, Clarence, right? You
Exactly,
assume a
exactly.
breach. Yeah, you assume a breach, and you say, okay, here are my most important assets. I'm gonna make sure that I hyper protect those and monitor those. And the intranet site, which certainly you shouldn't have important information on because it's an intranet site by nature. If it gets hacked and deleted, not gonna sweat it. I'm gonna go back to a back. But my IP, intellectual property, financial records, credit cards, so that kind of stuff. That's the stuff I make sure I put extra guard towers around. Mostly monitoring. APTs, advanced persistent threat actors, those folks, they have enough time and energy and money. If they want into your system, a la SolarWinds, they'll get into it. The question is, do you find out soon enough, and can you lock it down and make sure that they don't do any damage before? Yeah, and AI is going to change that cycle time, I think, quite a bit, unfortunately, for a lot of organizations. That's going to be some messy Fridays, I think, because the attacks never happen on a Monday morning. They always happen on Friday after as happy hour is starting. Usually, right, Clarence?
Yeah.
Usually get the call on Friday afternoon, right? Yeah. There's a breach. Great. We've talked about some of these issues. What's the one thing you want listeners to take away from the conversation today? The single tactical action that when they go back to their desk, they should be looking at to help lower the risk of some of the things we've talked about today.
Most of the
Take your time.
listeners of your podcast here are they're going to be experienced third party risk professionals that are you didn't enter the industry to answer questionnaires or to review questionnaires and documents. I think everyone that I've spoken to in industry thinks of their role as a higher level calling, and I think rightfully so. It's like there's so much risk that companies are taking on that cannot be solved with questionnaires and the status quo.
Yeah,
And consequently, on the other hand, I think there's also a lot of interest, apprehension, curiosity about AI and what it can do on the attacker side and the defender side.
yeah,
So I would highly encourage everyone listening to this to embrace what AI can do by reading your book, by attending our courses, by like
yep,
learning more about AI, because I truly believe that the industry is going to get transformed, is being transformed right now. And the people that are going to be the most secure in their positions, the people that are going to be the most productive and be the leaders of the next generation are the people that are prepared to think about not the surface, superficial things like how can I analyze this document using AI? How can I analyze this question using AI? But think about what does AI allow me to do that I wasn't able
yeah.
to do before, not just in terms of freeing up my time, but in terms of what level of access to information, to raw data to help me to fulfill the first principles of why third party risk exists in the first place.
It's
And
agreed.
I think that kind of thinking is like is a little lacking, but it's also what's going to drive the future evolution of this space. And I think that's exciting.
Yeah, I agree with you. My traveler's take would be that it's similar to yours. That the AI isn't. It's not a point solution. You look at your strategy about how you want to implement it to get to an ultimate goal of like I said earlier, smaller teams. So find ways that you can leverage it to identify the riskiest issues and attack those. Like you said, nobody wants to be spending time looking through SOC 2 reports. It isn't very rewarding at times. It's necessary to learn what a good SOC 2 looks like necessarily. But, for 20, 30 years, after a while, you've figured out what it is. So now you can use the AI to help you kind of identify what the issues that are missing in the SOC 2, as opposed to having to read through the whole SOC 2. That's a much more productive use of your time, I think is what you're saying, Clarence, right? I love that as well. I think that's great. Any parting thoughts, Clarence? Again, thanks for being a guest today.
No, thank you, Greg. I've been an admirer of your work, all the effort you've put into
Thank you.
educating the space. Like, love your books, love your
Oh, that's nice.
courses and your
Thank you so much,
podcast.
Clarence.
So thank you for having me on. Love to
That's great. No, it's
continue interacting
perfect.
and learning from you.
Thank you so much. Well, that is a wrap for our session. We're going to have Clarence stay on and do some bonus material where he's going to talk about his product and some of the solutions that it helps provide. But if you want, subscribe and so you can get more cyber risk insight updates and hopefully see you at the next episode. Thank you.